I stared at the letter in my hand, feeling my blood begin to boil. The audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall of these people was truly something to behold. The Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association was demanding that I remove my boat from my lake within 48 hours or face a $500 per day fine. They even threatened to have it towed at my expense. I couldn't help but laugh as I read the condescending language dripping with artificial authority. These pompous bureaucrats had no idea who they were messing with. They had been happily using my family's lake for years without permission, and now they were trying to dictate terms to me on my own property. Oh, this was going to be interesting. My name is Jake Sullivan, and until 6 months ago, I was just another overworked software engineer grinding away in Silicon Valley. I had spent the last decade building a startup that specialized in cybersecurity solutions for financial institutions. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was challenging and paid well. When a major tech conglomerate offered to buy us out for a sum with more zeros than I ever expected to see in my bank account, I decided it was time for a change of pace. I was 40 years old, financially secure, and thoroughly burned out. What I needed was peace and quiet away from the constant hustle and endless meetings. That's when I remembered the lake house. Sullivan Lake had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather, a commercial fisherman turned conservationist, had purchased the 50-acre lake and surrounding land back in the 1950s when the area was nothing but farmland and forests. He built a modest cabin on the shore and spent his retirement years fishing, writing, and teaching local kids about respecting nature. I still have vivid memories of summers spent at the lake with him, learning to fish, and listening to his stories about the old days when the water was so clear you could see 20 feet down to the bottom. He was something of a local legend, known for standing up to a mining company that wanted to devastate the surrounding watershed. "Water is life, Jake," he'd tell me, his voice gruff but gentle, not just for fish, but for all of us. Never let anyone tell you that profit is more important than protecting what nature gave us. Those words had stayed with me through the years, even as I had pursued my career in technology thousands of miles away. My father maintained the property, but rarely used it as his work kept him traveling. He was more of a city person anyway, never quite connecting with the lake the way my grandfather and I did. When both of them passed away within 2 years of each other, my grandfather at 92 and my father unexpectedly from a heart attack at 67, the lake and the cabin became mine. That morning had started like any other. I woke with the sun, made a pot of strong coffee, and took my mug down to the dock where my 16-foot aluminum fishing boat was tied up. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple, practical vessel, perfect for one person to navigate the lake and do some casual fishing. It had belonged to my grandfather, and though it was a bit weathered, I'd kept it in good working condition. There was something deeply satisfying about using the same boat he had used for decades, trailing my fingers in the same water, watching the same shores. I noticed the piece of paper immediately, an obnoxious neon orange color attached to the side of my boat with what appeared to be waterproof tape. "Violation notice," it screamed in bold black letters. I pulled it off, scanning the ridiculous content about unauthorized watercraft and aesthetic standards violations. According to this notice, my boat was inconsistent with community visual guidelines and needed to be removed from community waters. The notice also mentioned that all boats must be registered with the HOA and display appropriate community stickers. I was still staring at the letter when my phone rang. It was Ray Delgado, my closest neighbor and one of the few people I'd gotten to know since moving in. Ray was in his mid-70s, had known my grandfather well, and lived about a quarter-mile down the shore in a house he'd built with his own hands 50 years ago. "Morning, Jake. I see the welcoming committee finally found you," he said with a dry chuckle when I answered. I told him about the notice and letter, and he sighed heavily. Those HOA vultures have been getting more aggressive every year. They started building that fancy development on the north side about 10 years ago, and ever since then they've been acting like they own everything within 5 miles. Your grandfather would have run them off with a shotgun full of rock salt. You should know they've been using your lake for their fancy fishing tournaments for years now. They even have a private club called the Elite Anglers or some pretentious nonsense. Bunch of weekend warriors in expensive gear who couldn't catch a cold if you ask me. After hanging up with Ray, I did some digging online and found exactly what he was talking about. The Maple Creek Estates HOA website prominently featured photos of their annual lakeside fishing derby with smiling men in expensive fishing gear proudly displaying their catches on my lake. The Elite Anglers Club even had its own page boasting about their exclusive access to prime fishing waters and upcoming events. There were dozens of photos showing large gatherings on the eastern shore of the lake, which was definitely my property, complete with tents, barbecues, and even a temporary dock they must have installed for the events. The most recent post announced their biggest tournament of the year scheduled for the following weekend with a $5,000 prize and a catered lakeside barbecue. They were literally planning a massive event on my property without so much as asking permission. The audacity was breathtaking. One post even referred to Sullivan Lake as our community's crown jewel, as if they had any right to claim it. I needed advice from someone who understood the legal implications, so I called my friend Emma Porter. Emma and I had met during college and stayed in touch over the years. She was now an environmental lawyer specializing in water rights and land use issues. Exactly the expertise I needed. "Let me get this straight," she said after I explained the situation. "You own the lake, like actually own the deed to the lake bed and water rights, and they're telling you that you can't have your boat on it?" I confirmed that was exactly the case, and she burst out laughing. "Oh, this is too good. And they've been using it for events without permission? Jake, they don't have a legal leg to stand on. This is trespassing, plain and simple. Don't respond to their notice yet," she advised. "Let's gather some evidence first. If they've been doing this for years, we want to document everything before they have a chance to cover their tracks." I followed Emma's advice and installed wireless security cameras at strategic points around the lake, particularly focusing on the areas where the HOA seemed to hold their events based on the photos I'd seen online. The cameras were discreet but high resolution, with night vision capabilities and motion detection that would alert me on my phone whenever someone approached the lake. I also dug through my father's filing cabinet and found all the original deeds and property documents, confirming what I already knew. Sullivan Lake was completely, unambiguously mine, including the water rights and all land 15 feet beyond the high water mark around the entire perimeter. There was even a survey map from 2010 commissioned by my father that clearly marked the property boundaries. I received an email invitation to the upcoming HOA meeting. It wasn't addressed specifically to me, it seemed to be a mass email sent to everyone in the area. Curious about what these people were like, I decided to attend as an observer. The meeting was held in the Maple Creek Estates Community Center, an ostentatious building with columns and a fountain out front. Richard Wilkins was exactly what I expected, a man in his mid-50s with perfectly coiffed silver hair, wearing a blue blazer with gold buttons and a country club smile that never reached his eyes. When he got to the topic of lake regulations, I couldn't help myself. I raised my hand and asked pointed questions about lake ownership. The ripple of murmurs through the crowd and Richard's obvious discomfort told me everything I needed to know. He had no legal documentation to support his claims. After the meeting, I was approached by Gerald Thompson, president of the Elite Anglers Club. He was in his 60s with the weathered face of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors and the confident handshake of someone used to getting his way. The irony of him offering me access to my own lake was almost too much to bear, but I maintained my poker face. He invited me to their annual championship the following Saturday, their biggest event of the year, right on the east shore of my property. As I was leaving, I overheard Richard Wilkins speaking in hushed tones about accelerating the timeline and dealing with the Sullivan situation before it's too late. Whatever they were planning clearly involved my property, and they were concerned about my unexpected appearance. I was about to drive home when Richard Wilkins pulled up beside me in a sleek BMW. His smile was all teeth and no warmth as he suggested we have a chat about bringing my cabin up to community standards. When I questioned his authority over my property, he became increasingly uncomfortable. For just a moment, his mask slipped and I saw genuine concern before he recovered, making thinly veiled threats about starting our relationship on the wrong foot. The battle lines had just been drawn. When I got home, I discovered that Richard Wilkins hadn't wasted any time. My boat was gone from the dock, with nothing but a property violation notice left in its place. The notice stated that the boat had been impounded for non-compliance with community standards and could be reclaimed after paying a $750 fine and signing a compliance agreement. I called the local sheriff's office to report the theft, only to be told that this was considered a civil matter between me and the HOA. The deputy's reluctance to get involved made me wonder if the HOA had convinced local law enforcement that they had authority they didn't actually possess. By the time Emma arrived the next morning, I had moved from anger to cold, calculated determination. Emma and I spent the day going through all my documents, confirming beyond any doubt that I had clear title to the lake and surrounding property. Emma also discovered that the original Maple Creek Estates development plans explicitly acknowledged that Sullivan Lake was private property and not part of the development. "They've been lying to their own residents," Emma said. "Based on these records, they never had any right to regulate lake usage or access." Our answer about their endgame came when Ray Delgado stopped by with crucial information from his niece who worked for the county planning department. Maple Creek Estates was seeking approval for a major expansion, a luxury lakeside resort with condos, a marina, and a golf course on my lake. The pieces fell into place. Richard Wilkins and his cronies were setting up for a multi-million-dollar development project on land they didn't own. Emma and I formulated our strategy. Rather than going nuclear right away, we decided on a more subtle approach. Emma drafted a letter to the HOA board requesting copies of all documents pertaining to lake ownership and management, carefully worded to sound like a reasonable request rather than a challenge to their authority. We also decided to let the upcoming fishing tournament proceed as planned, with security cameras recording everything. The more evidence we had of them using my property without permission, the stronger our position would be. I also reached out to Sarah Lynn, a local newspaper reporter who had done stories on HOA overreach. She was immediately interested, especially when I mentioned the resort development plans, but agreed to hold off on publishing until we were ready. The day before the fishing tournament, Richard Wilkins appeared at my door with a different approach, less arrogant, more conciliatory. He offered to let me keep my boat on the lake in exchange for signing an agreement acknowledging the HOA's management role. When I mentioned the fishing tournament and the resort development, his composure cracked. He made implied bribes and veiled threats before leaving, clearly displeased with how the conversation had gone. Emma and I finalized our plan. She would attend the tournament as my guest, and we would document everything but not interfere. The real action would come after. The morning of the tournament dawned clear and sunny. From my cabin, I watched as trucks pulling boats arrived at the eastern shore of my lake. There must have been at least 20 vehicles parked on my property, with a large banner proclaiming 15th Annual Elite Anglers Championship. Around noon, Richard Wilkins arrived with well-dressed investors carrying portfolios. We moved closer with telephoto cameras, hearing him pitch the prime lakefront location, with exclusive access, claiming they already control the entire waterfront, and that establishing formal control is just a formality. While the tournament was in full swing, we put our plan into action. Emma filed an emergency injunction with the county court, which was granted immediately. With a sheriff's deputy accompanying us, we approached the gathering and announced that everyone was trespassing and needed to vacate immediately. The reaction was immediate chaos, with residents learning they had been lied to about their HOA fees including lake access rights. The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. Sarah's front-page article detailed the HOA's years of deception and the failed resort development scheme. The story spread to regional outlets and social media. At an emergency HOA meeting, multiple board members resigned under pressure from angry residents. I addressed the gathering, offering to work out a new arrangement that respected property rights while allowing responsible community access. 2 weeks later, Sarah called with the final piece of the puzzle. Richard Wilkins wasn't even a legitimate real estate broker. He had operated under a different name in Florida and been involved in similar schemes before being caught. The county launched an investigation into the HOA's finances, and Wilkins Development Partners filed a lawsuit against him for misrepresentation. Richard Wilkins disappeared, reportedly leaving town in the middle of the night. Over the following months, I worked with the new HOA board to establish the Sullivan Lake Conservation Trust, a non-profit organization managing controlled public access while preserving the natural environment my grandfather had fought to protect. The eastern shore became a small public park with a modest fishing pier and picnic area. On the day we opened the park, I placed a plaque honoring my grandfather with his favorite saying, "Water is life, not a commodity to be bought and sold." Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't just defeating your enemies, but transforming a battle into an opportunity to build something better. As I sit in my restored boat watching families enjoy the new lakeside park, I can't help but think my grandfather would be proud. The lake is healthier now than it has been in years, with clearer water and more abundant wildlife, proof that proper stewardship works better than unchecked development. As my grandfather would say, take care of the water and the water takes care of everything else. Words to live by, especially when dealing with entitled HOAs who don't know their limits.